I am Joe Justice coming to you from Fukuoka, Japan, and I consent to this recording for academic purposes and I hope eventual public distribution.
I'm very thankful that you agreed to do this interview with me. I think with your experience, it's incredibly valuable that you add to this project. I'm grateful you do this. What better topic to take than AI and leadership ethics?
It is my pleasure. If we don't have rigorous academic analysis building on academia from all of human knowledge, then it becomes only opinion. And having academic analysis with references is completely necessary. Well, if we're going to train AIs on truth,
Exactly.
and also for human decision making too. So thank you for contributing to the research that I hope gives everyone a more accurate perspective of what we know today.
Yeah.
And we can use it to make, I hope, factually educated AI.
Let's hope. My first question, or a general question, would be the role you had in an organization where they did AI.
There
And
have been
what was
many.
your role in contribution to it?
There have been many. I'm a busy person. And also it depends on which definition of AI we're using. There's been expert systems in software since the 70s, possibly earlier. The idea is you could ask very specific types of questions initially and get highly educated expert answers. And I've used expert systems since before college, the expert systems that were available at the time. So that's late 90s. Then the idea of statistics, which is what a lot of what we call AI is trained on, gradient descent algorithm with random reset once it finds a local minima or a local maxima. I've been lucky enough to have been using that at clients. Sometimes they called it data science, and then eventually the term AI was applied to many of the same groups because it was since the 2000s. And those were some of the larger companies in the world, like Microsoft, then getting to guest lecture at Google, and then 3M and 3M Healthcare, which at least in the United States is huge. Then also some European companies like Philips, and collaborating with teams involved in expert systems and statistics at European companies like Airbus and the chip design companies, ASML. They make the machines that make the chips, and also Intel then in the US. And then with some of the teams involved at Apple, and then in academia, figuring out how to use research to protect power grids for nations at a time. In the US at Oak Ridge National Laboratory,
Wow.
and they had some of the largest data mining at the time, and I got to learn a lot while I was there. And then now here in Japan with Toyota using Mob AI and Honda using Mob AI. And that's a very modern application now where we're talking about group work, group engineering assisted by AI, or in some cases, engineering assisting the AI, the other way around, depending on how skillful the AI is. Then absolutely the very most in Tesla, when I was an employee in Tesla. And what I'd be happy to try to get an academic record of is how AI has essentially replaced leadership. Now, leadership decides what's important to make or important to do or important to achieve. In a Musk company, they call it the 1,000-year goal. What's the 1,000-year time horizon for Tesla versus SpaceX versus the Boring Company versus Neuralink? And then the decision-making afterwards is essentially statistics. We would say you have no boss, your boss is data. And that those statistics are what most people would call AI. And yeah, highly trained expert systems, gradient descent algorithms with random reset. The reason being was speed. Those gradient descent algorithms, that AI, can give you an answer in 5 seconds or less that is more useful than any of the humans could. So why ever ask a human? We just wouldn't. So you essentially have 150,000 engineers engineering with no leadership anymore. Elon Musk chose the direction, and then everything's been outsourced to AI, including any budget decision. I mean, why would you ever ask a human, should we spend money on this? It would just be slow.
What do you understand under ethical leadership in the context with AI?
The AI needs to be trained ethically. In some simple way, an AI is a current AI is a lot like an internet search, and you can search, how do I cook chicken? Or you can search, how do I do something unethical?
Mm.
And the search engine will simply give you what it's been trained on. Well, it's a little more confusing than that because the training data, how do I say this? The training data can be, if you only give unethical training data and ask something and ask a simple question like, how do I cook chicken? You might be told, well, first go steal a chicken,
Mm.
and
Mm.
uh and especially steal a chicken from whoever needs it the most. And here's how to do that, and here's who
Yeah.
needs that chicken the most. And you're like, wait, I just asked how to cook chicken. Um, and in some ways, we're coming up against that now. Um, like if you ask currently this week, if you ask Microsoft's owned company, OpenAI, or if you ask Google Gemini, um, notes about history, you're given history feedback that is false.
Yeah.
Um, and right now it's comical, but what happens if we're just a few months possibly in the future, maybe a few years, but likely few months, and court case researchers anywhere in the world are fact checking precedents and given manipulated data back
Mm.
without knowing it. They
Mm.
just asked, like, what's the history of implementation of gun law in Vienna?
Yeah.
And they're and as you can see from the manipulated historical data now, which right now seems kind of funny, um, like George Washington being rendered as a black man,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
which seems comical now. But you think about, for example, a legal team searching what is the history of implementing gun law in Vienna, and you would get a non-factual record, and you wouldn't know it
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're not given the footnotes. And this is why the academic record is so important, to the extent that we can make any truthful data. We're all doing our best, I hope,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
So the
let.
ethical piece has to do with the training. And the
Mm.
reason it's important is because it's not visible what the training was when you're only querying the system.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we dive into that, what specific leadership skills do you think are needed to do that, to train an AI correctly, or how to help it make ethical decisions?
Wow. Okay, this is the most interesting question. And maybe part of this question I'm uniquely qualified, and part of this question I'm uniquely naive. So I'm happy to contribute what I've got, and I hope balancing this with someone who fills in my weaknesses, we get a more correct answer. What I know a lot about is collaborating with leadership. I'm really lucky. I've worked directly with the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, Ola, and the CIO, Magnus.
Mhm.
Then also some of the leadership at Toyota, some of the leading engineers at Honda, the absolute leadership at 3M. I don't mean to make this a what's my biography thing, but I've gotten to collaborate with leaders at all of the wealthiest companies in the world, all of them. I worked
Cool.
directly with Bill Gates. I worked for Jeff Bezos. I worked for Elon Musk. Um, I've worked in China as well, Shenzhen, et cetera. So cross-culturally,
Mhm.
the largest companies on planet Earth. I've been involved in some, or at least been present for some of the decision making in all of those companies. So
Yep.
I'm uniquely qualified or rarely qualified to talk about that.
Mhm.
So I'd like to. What do we do to create ethical AI? Well, we guide the AI to be trained on the most factful data possible. And that's difficult and that's hard work. And the real problem is companies all around the world collaborate with different governments for their subsidies and for their union contracts. I don't mean to like dig up dirt on
Mm.
companies, but decision making in a large company is often a compromise between what we would believe is best if we were in a vacuum, if nothing affected
Mhm.
us, and the
Mhm.
most we can accomplish by making compromises with different other people's agendas.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
many times decisions on where a factory is placed or what to build or even which projects to fund or even who to promote are not based on who's the most qualified or what's the best place or what the historical record would indicate. They're based on impactful political pressures,
Yeah. Yeah.
and some of which are required to not be named, to not be transparent. Like, look, you
Mm.
cannot say you'll get these collaborations, but if you invest in your factories here, you will get these collaborations. You cannot say that. So that's data that at a leadership level, it's normal to multiple times an hour to be exposed to information that should never be recorded in order for you to obtain that benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And many companies have that written into their policies. Well, that means you could not train an AI on what has actually happened in that company legally. The
Yeah. Yeah.
board would be put in jail. Um, and it is because of unethical action. So yes, if you had a perfectly ethically acting company, you could train the AI earnestly. But
Mm.
I don't mean to be digging up dirt. Very almost zero companies on planet Earth operate in a transparent, ethical way.
Yeah.
And as a result, the leaders would say, but don't train the AI on that. Don't expose the AI to that part of our procurement policy. Don't train the AI on that part of our supplier network. Don't train the AI on that part of our promotion criteria. And as soon as you start manipulating the data for anything except truth, you have created unethical AI. And
Mm.
the how unethical it is has become almost random.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
get things like a Black George Washington, which right
exactly.
now is comical, but a few months from now, litigating a court case could actually give the wrong person the death sentence. And
Exactly.
that's meaningful.
Exactly. Were you directly exposed to some decisions they had to make towards AI or AI implementations?
All the time, all the time. And the ethical part seems to have to do mostly with factfulness. But then there's the more mundane business, financial, and prioritization strategy of how do you train AI. That maybe is apart from the ethical piece.
Hmm.
But yes, I've been heavily involved in that in actually many of the world's largest companies in Europe, Asia, and the Americas.
Okay. And what would you say were the biggest challenges they had? Really
Well,
to what to train and what not to train, or?
yes, and uh, pragmatically, well, just to be very clear for anyone mining this research, in the current state of AI and for the foreseeable future, an AI really is the quality of its data. Like that is it. which is why it grew from statistics and data sciences. And trying to have clean data is what we call it, data that you can make sense of, because all data has some level of randomness, noise, or inaccuracy.
Yeah.
Trying to get clean data is the job of data scientists, and that is incredibly important.
Hmm.
Then the next part that we spoke about already a little bit is cleaning it ethically, not cleaning it to protect the current board, not cleaning it to hide certain types of information, but attempting to only make it optimally as truthful as possible. Okay,
Yeah.
well, with known that the AI is the quality of its data,
Yeah.
when it actually comes to leadership decisions to implement AI, it's mostly around which data do we start collecting and when. And this explains completely why the companies that are currently leading in AI are the leaders and the companies that are lagging or slow are lagging. And it's all about the speed data changes.
Hmm.
I'll just try to be clear. Most companies allocate a budget a year or more in advance. And so most leaders are used to thinking, I'll fund these projects a year or more in advance. And then at some point they will happen. Whether they're successful or not is another issue, but that's how the funding would happen.
Hmm.
Well, most leaders think the same way about funding AI and then about funding the AI data collection, data cleaning, and data processing and the use. So they say, we'll fund a data collection team, give them a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then we'll fund a development team to take that data and make useful AI. And we can expect to have meaningful conversation with AI, meaningful solutions solved by AI in 5 to 7 years. That would be a normal leadership way to thinking.
Yeah.
The companies that are currently leading operate in the area of my specialty, which is why I'm lucky enough to get to work with them. That's why I get to be into these companies. They make reallocation budget decisions multiple times a day. Some people call that agile, although some people use the word agile to mean other things. So that word is maybe not as helpful as we want it to be. One of the things agile is supposed to mean is quickly changing course, including quickly rebudgeting. But there's
Yeah.
a lot of companies with 9-year budgets saying they're agile. So the word is damaged. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
But my specialty is around shorter budget cycles, for example. In companies that are used to that, the leadership team and the engineers as well are comfortable saying, for the last 6 hours, we've been training the AI on data cleaned this way, and we're getting this type of useful answer and this type of junk. So we guess now for the next 6 hours, we should actually try to collect data a very different way, which actually will require different leadership approval and
Hmm.
different budgeting. Is that
Hmm.
okay?
Hmm.
And in most companies, that feedback loop won't be completed for a year or more. In companies that are used to making leadership re-changes and leaders who are comfortable saying, we were wrong yesterday, let's pivot today, or we were wrong this morning, let's
Yeah.
pivot this afternoon. In companies where that's acceptable and encouraged, they're the leaders in AI, far and away. So that is Google Gemini, OpenAI's ChatGPT. For all of their problems, they're far and away the publicly accessible leaders. And it gets a lot of flack, but when I use it, it's actually excellent. X.com's Grok.
Hmm.
Um, which is striving to be the most ethical, but it's also relatively immature compared to ChatGPT. But I already get a lot of good answers from it.
Okay.
Um, so the speed of changing the data seems to be at this point in time in March 2024 the winning strategy above all else.
Okay. Okay. So how do you see it in relation to resilience? Does it really help if they make ethical leadership decisions? Will a company become more resilient toward the challenges posed by AI?
Over the long run, yes. And the long run here is probably 9 years at the long end, the end of this year at the short end.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, lucky enough, we have curves of IQ equivalence tests of AI. So you can make a trend line. At any time something different could happen, but there is a trend. And the current trend is all of the popular, common, publicly accessible AIs already score higher than an average human on a typical IQ test. And the trend is before the end of this year, 2024, all of the publicly available AIs, like the normal ones even, will score higher than any human has ever scored
Mhm.
by before the end of, that's the trend. We don't know, but
Yeah.
that's the trend. Now, interestingly, what that implies is by the end of next year, maybe a little sooner, AI will score higher than all humans combined. So if you were going to ask an AI, should I invest in this or should I invest in that? Or should I build my factory here or should I build my factory there? You would get a better answer than all humans alive pretty soon.
Mm.
Already you'd get a better answer than asking an average human already. So it's already a good idea to at least check whatever your significant decision is with AI. Like as of today,
Mhm.
that's a good idea. By the
Yeah.
end of this year, it'd be a competitive advantage. And pretty soon, the only way to outmaneuver a competitor is to have earlier access to an AI or a better AI.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, then what does that mean in terms of resiliency? Likely, the only resiliency is to have earlier or better access to AI soon.
Yeah.
And soon, like end of next year soon, or maybe sooner. It depends. Current trend is end of next year soon, end of 2025 soon. So that's important for resiliency. And then that gets to ethical AI. Well, what if the AI that still gives you the best decision on investments is truly unethical and in a difficult to detect way?
Mhm.
So you end up um, unintentionally or intentionally making repetitively horribly unethical decisions, but that's the only way to win as a country or a business or a human.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's important, and now's the time because you can still, as a human, make an interesting business decision and be disruptive.
Mhm.
That capability might be over before the end of 2024.
Mm.
So hopefully there is ethically accessible AI in order to maintain resiliency.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. How do you think ethical leadership will help with that adaptation towards AI for those companies who just start to get into it? As we know, it's a race. If they're not joining, they're out.
Well, ethical leadership is almost absent from the world in 2024. I don't mean to just be digging up dirt, but most companies have policies that you're not allowed to talk about many of the decisions routinely made at all
Mm.
levels.
Mm.
Because if they were, the company would be liable because the activities that are being done are illegal
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
almost every single company and in almost every single country.
Yeah.
So for those companies to somehow magically create, collect, or collaborate with ethical AI, like there would have to be a moratorium on legal enforcement of past decisions. For example, all the world's governments would have to say, any big company, we know a certain percent of every decision you've made today was illegal somewhere. And a certain percentage of the decisions made today are illegal, even where you're incorporated. We accept that. We're not going to go after you for all of the rest of 2024 and all the rest of 2025. We simply have to have you be completely transparent so we can train AI on what's actually happening
Hmm.
without
Hmm.
scrubbing data, so that before the end of 2025, we have a truthfully trained AI
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to then bring humanity forward. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we miss the chance. I mean, wow, I think about this a lot like the the old gods that were jealous and turned people into nine-headed monsters for being too pretty and that kind of thing. And and if we trained AI on that type of ethics, and then AI became smarter than all humans combined, we'd get some really unhelpful policies out
True.
of that AI, right? Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now.
So in your role, as you have a lot of exposure to many companies, how do you promote the culture of that open communication about ethical AI?
At the working level, the engineering level, it's very easy. We introduce tactics. There's this whole culture around trying to create workplace transparency, open collaborative workplace safety. At the engineering level, it's very easy to start it, at least. To maintain it forever is probably incredibly difficult. But we introduce retrospectives where people have anonymous or non-anonymous methods to say what went well, what didn't go well, what should we try to do better. um, Real-time metrics, uh, not on like how long people spent working, but like how many seconds does it take to make a part of the system we're making, or how many pennies or yen or RMB does it cost today to buy this? Make that real
Okay.
time visible. And then the team can try to make decisions that improve that number today.
Yeah.
Then they can inspect and adapt and have their retrospectives on their success or not today. And creating those short feedback loops encourages transparency. Psychological safety helps a lot. And psychological safety is often assisted by a coach to introduce psychological safety. And then again, those retrospectives. Group work as opposed to solo work,
Mhm.
where you rotate all positions and try to avoid a feeling of hierarchy where someone's checking on each other. There could be hierarchy, maybe that's okay. But in the group work, people act as if they're equal or try to.
Yeah.
Creates psychological safety and transparency. At the engineering level, it's very easy to implement these things. And in fact, I do it as a business all the time. Companies ask
Okay.
me to do that. Then
Okay.
in working teams at any level, it's easy to introduce that. So if you have a leadership coalition, a leadership working team, a junior, a new hire working team, a new hire working coalition, it's actually the same retrospective practice group work where you attempt to avoid feeling the hierarchy. Or
Mhm.
some companies have very little hierarchy, then it's easier. In
Yeah.
Finland, for example, I have a very easy time. The hierarchy means something different. A new hire can walk up to the CEO and say, that's wrong. And it's okay. They won't get fired.
Cool.
You can't do that in Japan or India or Vietnam, right? So it really
True.
depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
at a working group level, it's no problem. Systematically, when you say like, let's be transparent about who we choose for procurement, people would go to jail. The companies would refuse it, right? Which is why I think the world's governments would need to say, look, we need transparent data more than we need to penalize you for making this decision or that decision.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I hear you correctly, you say the involvement of different stakeholders helps in your discussion about ethical AI.
Yes, the involvement of different stakeholders acting as more like peers as opposed to checks,
Yeah.
and rotating so everyone takes turns doing the same job seems to be completely important. Again, as opposed to someone checking someone else.
Yeah.
They take turns where everyone watches. That seems to be where we get maximum transparency, minimal manipulation.
So if you look at the companies you've worked with, um, are they taking any steps towards the topic we talk about now, that ethical leadership, ethical considerations with AI, or is that just buzzwords?
Um, Currently, I don't see the only company I see acting on it is the one that's getting the most bad press, I
Mm,
think, because the other companies are terrified. And that is the Musk collection of companies. I'm not saying they're perfect. I did
mm,
work in Tesla as an employee. I'm really proud of that. I learned a lot there. But I also worked in plenty of other companies. So I don't mean to say that I would only say it's right, whether it's right or not.
yeah.
What I want to say is the Musk companies currently seem to be, and in best I can tell, truly are attempting to collect accurate data and not manipulate it in any way. I've not seen that in any other company, and no, I don't see them even talking about that.
Wow.
The conversation in every company currently is how do we make the most money uh, and give the highest return on investment to our shareholders. Um, and in fact, when Herbert Diess at Volkswagen tried to say, let's have shorter iteration cycles, and then the workers' council said that means we would change our jobs more regularly. We change our skills more regularly. We don't want that. That puts pressures on us as the workers' council. The board publicly uh, fired Herbert Diess, um, saying that that will make a short-term effect on profitability. So there's zero tolerance for any move that's not maximizing profit. And there's complete acceptance for daily suboptimal and illegal information hiding as long as it's completely hidden.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not seeing that anywhere except the Musk companies. The challenge is Grok as an AI platform, while I actually get a lot of good data out of it, is way junior to OpenAI. And at the current state, OpenAI is going to win. And as in, like, you'd have to ask OpenAI before you'd make an investment decision, or you'd lose.
Mm,
And in
mm,
fact, the companies that pay to get slightly faster access to OpenAI will win.
yeah.
And Microsoft doesn't have this track record in their current leadership of saying we're going to give equal access to everyone in order to be fair. Microsoft in their current leadership is saying, how do we make the most money possible? So it makes a highest bidder continues to win system based on unethical data collection. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is the current trend. That is the current trajectory. Likely by the end of next year, that is the dystopia that would happen.
So I hear you correctly, there are a lot of obstacles hindering such a ethical AI strategy.
Mm, Hundreds of thousands of leaders around the world would all need to be willing to go to jail in order to start publishing factual data.
Yeah.
And they'd need to do it likely before the end of 2024.
Yeah.
So the likelihood is really tiny. Or somehow magically, Grok or another player, but right now I'm only aware of Grok that's really trying to be fact-based, trained only. Grok would somehow need to leapfrog several generations of training, which is unlikely.
Mm. So the problem basically, if I distill it correctly, is not the AI. The problem is that ethical leadership seems not to be as existent as it should.
The current political and law systems and financial systems all around the world penalize ethical leadership. It's very difficult to compete as someone who chooses to be completely transparent in your dealings.
Yeah.
In fact, it's illegal to be completely transparent in your dealings in some countries. you would that would not be allowed.
Yeah.
So the current world ecosystem, uh, I'd say it's not even directly those leaders' faults, right? If they want to run a competitive business, they have little choice. It's like performance enhancing drug use in pro sports. It's not that you don't use them, it's that you can't be caught because no one can play at that level without performance enhancing drugs that create long-term damage. Well, leaders are in the same bind.
The closing question. What would be your advice to C-level and board level to really start implementing ethical AI strategies?
Attempt to enact transparency policies, and information unhiding policies to the extent that you can. And more is better. And immediately before the end of 2024, but I mean, truly every day is useful at this point. We're at an inflection point. We're in the inflection point. So it's an interesting time. So if at least all hire and firing data can be completely transparent, truly, not just like dates and maybe even names, but even like the circumstances and who disagreed, the scary stuff that people really don't want to release. The more that can be released without editing, the better. All across the agency, and making that a priority would be the most useful leadership tactic for ethical AI. But most companies aren't training their own AIs yet. They're just hoping to buy access to someone else's. Now, those other AIs are being trained on those companies' data, right? So if you use Microsoft Teams and you have Microsoft email accounts, and Microsoft software development, you may be choosing to be sharing some data with Microsoft, which is helping its AI. Or even if it's agnostic, Microsoft's AIs are still training on general data about the types of traffic coursing through your companies. Or if you're in the Google ecosystem or the Apple ecosystem, you're helping train their AIs. So even if you're not building your own, you're helping train the others. So the extent that you're willing to increase transparency will at least increase the ethical action and ethical training of those AIs. The other tactic companies can take is to start training their own AIs. And where there's still plenty of chance to win is in decision-specific AIs. Like if you're in a company that makes paint tools and paints, you still have a chance to make the world's best answer to the question, which of our paint portfolio is most useful given these circumstances? So start training that right now. And then that actually becomes the only value of your company at whenever the inflection point of AI happens, which is currently trending to be the end of next year. I mean, it will not matter if you own a factory or do you have this many employees. It's what's the quality and speed of decision making. So if you have your own AI that is best in the world at any given question, that then becomes the entire value of your company. And there's still a chance to do that for niche decisions.
That's some great advice. Thank you, Joe. So that concludes our interview. I'm very thankful. It was super interesting to get your insights. Really, really great. Thanks a lot, Joe.
My pleasure, Annette. Please have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you very much for spending part of your morning with me.
Thank you for taking time. Thanks, Joe. Ciao.
Cheers.